So great to see you all. Let me just get everybody into the room. Bear
Sorry,
with me
Ange.
1 second. Yeah,
Alrighty.
so we've got people coming into the room. I'm just going to, bear with me a second. Hi all, we'll start in just one moment. I'm just going to see if I can get Marcia to co-host so I can concentrate on talking to you. And for some reason, I don't think it's going to let me know. Okay, I'll have to try and keep an eye on people coming into the room as well. We need to sort out this technology side of things. All right, I can't worry about that. Let's start. Welcome to Education Angels webinar on positive behaviour guidance. Now, this is a part 2 webinar. That said, it's okay if you didn't see part 1 because you won't miss anything. You can always go back and watch that recording, but this should still all make sense to you, even if you've not seen part 1. Yeah? So if we're all good, I'll start. Marcia and team, can everybody see and hear me? Is it all working technology-wise? Because I can't tell.
We can see you and we can hear you clearly.
Great, thank you very much. All right, let's get going. I'm just going to share my slides, everybody. Right, here we go. So today, as I say, we're talking about strategies for dealing with challenging behaviour. We'll cover 3 main topics. One, the guidance approach to positive behaviour management or strategies, and looking at behaviour being communication, and that often challenging behaviour is just a normal part of growing up. Then we'll talk about social competence and why this is important, and how to develop your child's social skills, because it's often here where children demonstrate the most challenging behaviours. And then we'll discuss common strategies to support your child's behaviour, or really more to support you in supporting your child with their behaviours. So behaviour guidance is about teaching children to self-regulate, teaching them to make good decisions because they're the right things to do, not because they're frightened of a consequence or some kind of punishment that you might deliver as a parent or educator or caregiver. So it's about learning to control our emotions, to self-regulate. So we have to start from the point of all behaviour is a form of communication. So if a child is demonstrating challenging behaviour, sorry, I'm just trying to move all these Zoom boxes out of the way because I can't actually see my own slides. If a child is demonstrating challenging behaviour, then they're communicating that something's wrong. So the first thing we should do is think halt. So not to be reactive ourselves, but to halt for a moment and just think, what's being communicated here? Or is my child hungry? Are they angry or suffering from some other emotion that they can't control? Are they lonely? Are they just looking for attention? And are they tired? So if you think halt, hungry, angry, lonely, or tired, then you're going to be looking, then you'll probably quickly find that it's either a physical or emotional challenge that they're trying to communicate to you. So, and again, just a reminder that we can only expect a child to take responsibility for their own actions if we give them the freedom to control their own behaviours. So remember, if we control their behaviour, then we're responsible for their actions. And although some of their behaviours or actions might be very amusing, a lot of undesirable. So we need to teach children to control their behaviour by teaching them to control their emotions. And that's a really challenging thing for most people to actually learn. And we all know adults who still can't control their emotions very well. So, and we need to remember too that we experience life through our emotions. Every important decision we make in our life is an emotional decision. You know, what to study, what job to get, marry, whether to move house. All these big decisions in our lives are actually emotional decisions. So, and add to that as well, learning in itself is an emotional journey. So as we're learning, we experience many, many emotions. You know, it can be as we persist through difficulty, as we follow our curiosity and persist through our learning challenges, then we experience a lot of these emotions. You know, the joy of achievement, the pleasure of actually achieving something, finishing something that we've been working hard on. It could be relief, general satisfaction, and also fun. But also when learning's tough, then we're offer in a stressful situation. We feel impatient with ourselves, we get frustrated. It can be anxiety. You know, when you think of exams, for example, it can be a fearful or even anxious experience too. So even for very little young children, the learning journey is a very, very emotional. It's one fraught with emotion. So if you think about the fact that most learning happens in the first 3 years of our lives, imagine what a roller coaster of emotion that is for our children. Because they're doing most of the learning, experiencing all those emotions, when very often they don't have the experience or the language to be able to express how they're feeling. And that's why we see a lot of challenging behaviors with children. So, and also remember too that our emotional states are contagious. And we all know this. If you walk into a room and maybe, I don't know, you've walked into a room and two adults have been having an argument, it doesn't matter if they pretend everything's okay. You can sense the tension in the room. You know there's something wrong and you know there's a negative energy because you can feel it. Our intuition tells us. So we need to remember that when we're working with children as well. You know, in order to support children to self-regulate and to be calm, we have to stay calm. And there's a great little quote here, stay calm to be calm. That's a really great way of remembering to just take a deep breath, pause for a moment, and be more responsive than reactive. And it's a well-known fact, and the Heart Math Institute and neuroscientists and psychologists have done a lot of work on this. That our thoughts are electric. We all know that the brain has lots of electrical impulses, but it's also been proven that emotions are magnetic. And if you think about that, then it makes perfect sense that you can feel how other people feel, that you can sense if they're not okay, and you know that something's wrong with them even before you tell them. And that's because our emotions are magnetic. So there's a magnetic pull. And that's why you can often feel really attracted to somebody who is really a really positive person. And at the same time, for somebody conversely who's a really negative person, you don't really like spending time around them, and it feels like you're being repelled, like you want to move away from that situation.
Angie, can I
Yeah.
just ask you to invite some more people into the room, please?
I actually can't see. This is where I need a co-host, really, because I can't see when I'm sharing slides. So I'm sorry, everybody. I just need to pause for a moment.
Thank you.
Do we have anybody else?
Yeah, there's five more people.
Can you see them, Marcia? Can you let them in? I can't see anybody in the room.
No, I can't. If you click on the three boxes at the top, it should say for you to be able to make me co-host.
I can make you host, but I can't make you co-host. So I'll try making you host. I'll do that. Let's do that. Thanks, Marcia. What a great team I have, guys. Sorry, I'll just go back to where I was. Okie dokes. Yeah, you can see my screen. Yeah, all good. Yeah, cool.
Definitely. Good to go. Thank you.
So when we think that, you know, the most learning happens in our first 3 years of life, and learning being an emotional journey, children often, under preschool children and some older children and indeed some older adults, often don't have the ability to articulate how they're feeling. And this can be for many reasons, but for young children, it's more often than not that they don't have the language. So, and if we can't explain how we feel and vocalize where we're at, then you will see that young children will act out their feelings. And, you know, we've often seen shouting and screaming, hitting, biting, kicking, throwing things, tantrums, etc., etc. And although these are considered undesirable behaviors, and, you know, we're raising social beings, so yes, we don't want them to behave that way as adults, but for children, this is normal early childhood behavior. So what we need to do is to develop strategies where we're teaching them a better way to express their feelings. And some children struggle with these more than others. So it's really important to teach your child to self-regulate. And in doing that, we need to give them the language to express themselves, to grow their emotional literacy. And part of learning to self-regulate is, it's often called left and right brain integration. So we experience, everything we experience goes, and we talked about this on the last webinar, so if you missed it, do watch the recording. Every experience goes first through our right brain to our left brain. And our right brain is generally known as the emotional brain. This is very, very simplified neuroscientist, because I'm no neuroscientist. This is just what we've learned as we've journeyed through the early childhood profession. So our right brain is very much known as the emotional brain, the intuitive brain, the feeling brain. And our left brain is known as the logical and analytical brain. So what we're trying to do when we're teaching children to self-regulate, we're trying to get them to engage their thinking brain, so they behave less impulsively and they are more responsive than they are reactive. And this is how Dr. Daniel Siegel coined the phrase "name it to tame it." So to tame a really powerful emotion, name the emotion. And this is the same for adults as well. It really helps us. So for any of you, if you're caught up in a wave of powerful, strong emotions, like sadness or anger, then try and engage your thinking brain as much as you can. And so even for you, naming the emotion actually helps. But for children, they often don't have the language. So we need to teach them emotional literacy, to give them the names for all the common feelings, so that when they're feeling that powerful surge of emotion, they can at least communicate that to somebody. And in doing so, very often, it calms the child down. And even if it doesn't calm them down, it can calm us down, because we understand where they're at and what they're feeling. So the way we do this, it's as easy as 1, 2, 3. And it's these 3 steps are really, really important to remember. The first thing to do is we must acknowledge how the child feels. So by doing that, we're demonstrating empathy, we're teaching empathy, but also it's calming for the child. So we're acknowledging that they're upset, they're feeling sad, they're angry, wherever the feeling might be. So we're actually validating their feelings at the same time as teaching them emotional language, which is the next step. So name the emotion to support emotional literacy, but also to help engage the left brain, and therefore to calm that feeling of high emotion that the child has. And then once we've got over that first 2 stages and the child is starting to at least be able to listen and calm down a bit, then talk about how you can help them solve the problem. And we'll talk about this part of problem solving with children in future webinars in a bit more detail. But supporting a child to solve the problem themselves is very, very empowering. And very often, as very nurturing adults, as I'm sure every one of you is, we want to go in and we want to support the child. And sometimes we can go a step too far and rescue the child from a situation. when more often than not, as often as we possibly can, we want to support them, giving them the tools and strategies to solve their own problems. And a great example of that, and we see this all the time, is when you see two children having an argument over a toy, for example, and they're really struggling, and you know the kind of, there's a tug of war happening, or they're arguing, or they're saying unkind things. Sometimes it's best not to jump in straight away. It's best to just observe and see if they can sort it out for themselves, because that way the child is learning to negotiate, and it's learning to manage situations where they're dealing with unreasonable people. Obviously, if it's not working and you can see it escalating too much, then stepping in and supporting is the right thing to do. But be careful not to jump in too soon. So does anybody have any questions, or are there any questions in chat? Let me have a look. Do feel free to, if you have any questions as we go, feel free to put them in chat. Stella says she has some emoji pillows that she uses for the children to get them to name the emotion. That's so cool. That's really cool. Yeah. That's a great strategy. And, you know, those emotion cards too, and even this slide I've shown, you know, printing something like that out and getting children to name the emotions, or matching the emotion with the name of the emotion for older children. So you're teaching them sight recognition of words too. So there's lots of things you can do to teach emotional literacy.
I've asked you not to jump on David and get hurt. Okay. Thank you.
Sorry, that's somebody. Yeah, okay. Emotion cards work well for me. Yeah, that's cool. Great. All right. Well, as we go, if you do have any questions, feel free to post them in the chat. So, our goal is to empower children to make good choices, to do the right thing because it's the right thing to do, and not because we're going to deliver some kind of reward or punishment. So in doing that, we use the guidance approach, and we covered this slide off in the last webinar, but I'd just like to remind you on this one too. The guidance approach trusts children. It trusts that they are rational and that they want to cooperate. They want us to be proud of them. They view children, this approach views children as competent. It focuses on meeting the child's current needs and teaches children it's okay to make mistakes. And that's so important, because if we're fearful of making mistakes, then we're actually reducing our ability to learn. And it also teaches children that the adult is the leader and has protective power, that we're there to support them. We're not somebody to be feared. We're somebody that's there to support and nurture them, and to help them grow into the amazing humans that they ultimately will grow into. So it teaches children to take responsibility for their own actions. And we talked about when we try, when children make behavioral mistakes, we teach, we don't reprimand. So it's punishing children for making behavioral mistakes is as bad as punishing children who fall over when they're trying to walk. It's the same thing. So, you know, when a child's learning to walk from being a crawler and learning to stand up, they're going to fall over many, many times. And we don't need to punish them to make them try again and to make them walk better. It's an innate human driver. And it's the same with behavioral mistakes. Children don't want to be seen as the naughty child. They don't want to get it wrong. They're trying their best to get it right. So the best thing we can do when they do make behavioral mistakes is to support them and to teach. Because if we punish and we reprimand, and if we do that too often, yes, it has major impacts on the child's self-esteem and general well-being, but you will see the behavioral challenges escalate. You'll see that children will become resistant or defiant. They'll rebel. They'll run away, they'll retaliate, they'll hit back, they'll kick you, they'll scratch you, they'll bite you, or even worse, they might escape or even submit. Sometimes a child that appears to be well behaved can be actually so browbeaten and have their confidence knocked so much that it's not that they're well behaved, it's that they've just given up. And yes, that's rare. That's rare because thankfully.
The other one that was on autism. It's from Education Angels. It's a live webinar.
Thankfully, not many children are.
I don't know if they can hear me.
That position.
I don't know what's going on.
Can you please mute?
You can mute, Marcia. You can mute people. Your end, your host. I can't do it anymore. Okay. So in that, rewards and punishment are not effective tools because they don't teach children how or why to behave a certain way. It teaches children that it's important to behave because if I don't, then I might get told off by my mum or my educator. It's not teaching them that they need to behave a certain way because it's the right way to behave. And therefore, it's very difficult for those behavioral skills to transfer into different situations. For example, what happens when you're not around to correct that behavior. So when children are unable to, if we reward children, if we use that as a strategy, when they're unable to earn the reward, they may feel frustration or shame or decide to stop trying because why should I do that when you're not going to reward me for doing it? So it puts the child's focus outside of themselves. And that means that if you have rewards or punishment as a strategy, then you have to be there all the time. You have to control how they're behaving through those rewards and punishments. So what we want to do is teach them to be intrinsically motivated, to be internally motivated to do the right things themselves. And there's some research by Dr. Suzanne Bouffard, who's a developmental psychologist. And she says the kids who have the biggest struggle with self-regulation are those most damaged by reward and punishment strategies. Pretty powerful, hey? Very powerful statement to make. So we did mention in the last webinar that there are 4 internal triggers for disruptive behavior, being exuberance, which is childhood enthusiasm, exploration, which is another word for curiosity, because children don't know better. They simply don't have the life experience to know any better, or because children have lost control. They lack the understanding of what's going on here. They get frightened and they lose control. So 25% of challenging behavior is children just being children. So let's have a look at each one of these in turn. So let's have a look at, we'll start with exuberance. So exuberance, what do we do to support or quell, I guess, an overenthusiastic child? And an overenthusiastic child, that can be a positive or a negative as well. You know, they can be super duper happy, but as high as the kite on the happy hormones and not able to follow simple instructions and become a disruption. But equally, that enthusiasm can be that they actually lose control. Excuse me. Because for the same reason that, you know, they're feeling so excited, they just don't know how to deal with it and how to channel the energy. And before you know it, excuse me, before you know it, you go from all this happy excitement to tantrums and tears. And I'm sure most of you have seen this. If you work with young children, I'm sure every one of you have seen this as parents or caregivers. So how do we support this? Each one of these could be a whole topic on itself. So I'm just going to give some simple strategies, but do post any questions you may have in chat and I can answer them for you, or I will endeavour to answer them for you. So to ensure that we don't get too overexcited and we can manage our exuberance, you know, the enthusiasm of childhood, it's really important to have consistent rules and boundaries. Because if we're not consistent, then children will explore to see how far they can push boundaries. So, you know, when children are in a very excited, hyper state, if those rules and boundaries are very clear and understood to them, they're less likely to behave in a way that is super unacceptable. Be reasonable in your own expectations. So learning to control our emotions is one of the most challenging things to do. And this includes positive emotions as well as negative. So, and like overexcitement, it can be really, really challenging for children to learn how to temper that emotion. If they're struggling and if they're going way off the scale and out of control with excitement or enthusiasm, then change the tempo of the environment or change the environment. So don't set them up for failure by overstimulation. Because if you think, like, if children, more often than not, many of you will see, if you take your child out to an event or a party, they're having such a great time with the friends, and you know, there's that saying, it always ends in tears. Well, that's simply because of this. It's the emotion, and the energy of the emotion can be quite difficult for children to cope with. So understand your child's internal triggers too. So I know for one of my sons, I could not go to play groups for extended periods of time because it was overstimulating for him and he couldn't cope with the groups of people. And he was very, very sensitive to noise and to crowds of people and to certain textures and things like that. So I knew his triggers. So I would keep visits short, or I would leave if I found that the tempo of the environment or the energy of the environment was getting too much for him. So it's really important to know your child. You know them best. So, you know, be that supportive adult, and if it gets too much for them, then they're not going to make the decision to remove themselves. They don't have the life experience to know that this is going to be too much for me, or this is going to be overstimulating for me. So we need to model it and teach it over time, and then they do in time learn to manage it for themselves. So the second internal trigger is natural curiosity. So exploration and the emotion of curiosity, which is the same as the internal driver of seeking. You know, it's something that all animals, including humans, are born with. It's one of our key human drivers is curiosity. And it's really, and we know that children are innately curious, and it can sometimes get them into a lot of trouble, you know, touching things they shouldn't touch, breaking things you don't want them to break, going places you don't want them to go, climbing those fences you don't want them to climb. You know, this is why being a parent can be really, really tough work, because children are so driven by that curiosity and they want to explore absolutely everything. So I think it's really important that we just understand it's a natural human driver, that children are not being naughty when they do this. It might be hard work for us, but they're not being naughty. So making sure that if something is a danger, keep it out the way. If something's precious and you don't want it broken, don't set them up for failure. Just don't have it around. They're going to be curious and they're going to be poking their nose in and playing with things they shouldn't play with. It's just natural curiosity at play, and it's a beautiful thing, and it's what grows them into little geniuses as they get older. So just have realistic expectations around that. Again, this consistency comes up every time. Be consistent in expectations. Remember that children act out their emotions and will explore to test boundaries. And when I say explore, yes, we often think of exploring as being a physical act, something that we do, and it's more of a cognitive thing, but they explore emotionally as well. So, you know, if I don't know, say dad is consistent with the boundaries and the child knows that it doesn't matter how much I scream and stamp my feet, I'm not going to get my own way, say. And then they go to mum, and mum is a lot more relaxed and thinks, well, you know, so what? Doesn't matter, just this once. As soon as you do that, then you will find that your child will start to demonstrate more challenging behaviours again, because they start to get confused and they have to explore the boundaries again to find where the boundaries lie. So having consistent boundaries and expectations provides a sense of safety and security. And if you take that away, then children will naturally keep testing to see where those boundaries lie, get that sense of safety and security back. So being clear on behavioural expectations, it's linked to consistency, but it's being clear and communicating to your child what those boundaries are in a way that they understand. And for some children, it could be that you have picture cards. It could be that you have signs and symbols. It could be that you just talk to them about what the boundaries are. But it's really, really important that they're communicated in a pace, a tone, and a way, whether it be language or images or both, in a way that the child understands. Because very often what looks like bad behavior is simply, I don't understand. So I'm just looking that we've got a couple of comments here. Oh yeah, we're just talking about children liking to explore. Yeah. And as with any learning, expect many mistakes. Our children are trying to get it right, and it just takes practice. And then not knowing better. I mean, this one seems obvious, of course, a young child very often doesn't know any better. So we need to teach children it's okay to make mistakes, because this is how we learn. And if we don't teach them it's okay to make mistakes, then that can have an impact on future learning. Because if we reprimand a child for getting things wrong, then all that will happen is they'll stop trying, because the punishment, or the fear of the punishment, is actually a barrier to them being able to learn and follow their curiosity and make mistakes, because that's the key. The curiosity is the key to learning. So again, have realistic expectations in line with their developmental stage. Support them in making decisions for themselves. And we talked about this chart above and below the line. Above the line is where children and adults are feeling empowered. So give them as many opportunities as you can to take ownership, accountability, and responsibility for their actions. So do that by supporting them to make decisions for themselves, so they take responsibility. And if that decision is to explore something they shouldn't explore, and then they break an object that belongs to somebody else, then give them the responsibility and accountability. Maybe get them to help you fix it and talk about the impact of that behavior. We don't need to tell them off. They can be part of putting it right. And again, avoid setting them up for failure by expecting too much. And it's really important that we, as educators, parents, teachers, that we expose children to new and novel experiences in a safe and supportive environment, because that offers many, many opportunities for learning. Builds on their prior learning, it builds their experience, it builds their knowledge about themselves and the world around them. And this is what many early childhood providers do. It's why we have childcare providers like Education Angels, a home-based provider, and childcare centres, etc., because we understand this to be true, and it's so important for child development. So, and the biggie is the loss of control. So, and that's often out of a lack of understanding, and more often than not, it's a lack of emotional understanding. So we need to teach emotional literacy, with that name them to tame them, name the emotion to tame the emotion. And that's a great way for you to remember it too. And teach strategies for self-regulation. And there are many strategies for self-regulation. I think one of our attendees on the last webinar said about blowing out the candle, smell the flower and blow out the candle. So breathing in slowly, breathing out slowly, because that's like mindfulness breathing. But also teaching children to manage their own emotions and feelings. Yes, through emotional literacy, but what do you do when it all goes wrong? So I was working with a little boy a couple of weeks ago, and he struggles to control his emotions, particularly negative emotions, and his response is to kick out and throw things and hurt other children, and it's not out of any any will to hurt somebody else. He's just lashing out because he's lost control, doesn't know what to do with this negative emotion he's feeling, so he lashes out at other people. It's like he goes straight to fight or flight, and so he's missing that step in between on how to control it. Now he won't learn that overnight. We can't say stop throwing, or put those toys down, or don't hurt your friends, or all these things that you often hear teachers say, because A, he's not really hearing it, because he's already lost control, and B, he's not doing it because he doesn't believe that. He knows it's not right to hurt people. It's just in that moment he's lost control and he can't find his way back to finding some kind of balance and get back to that normal state. So the best thing to do, and what we do with his interest was dinosaurs, as a lot of preschool children love, particularly boys, girls too, but I find mostly boys. So we were talking about what dinosaurs eat. We made it part of the curriculum, talking about that they're big, strong and heavy, and they have big feet, and the stompy noise that dinosaurs make. And we read books about them, and we in doing that, we taught him too that dinosaurs, when they get angry, like to stomp their feet, and this is what they do when we feel this emotion. We're feeling really angry with ourselves, we can stamp our feet like a dinosaur, and basically not making him wrong, but helping him, once we got him to calm down, giving him other strategies, but teaching them in a situation where he's not caught up in the emotion, where it was safe for him to hear it as well. So it's not a lecture. We were talking about dinosaurs. We weren't talking about him. So it was outside of himself. So it was easy for him to take that in that narrative of the story that we made up about the dinosaurs. And so, and because really, if we can teach him to, and some people might find stamping your feet and screaming unacceptable, and I totally understand that. We wouldn't expect to see an adult behave that way in social situations. But remember, we're scaffolding his learning. At the moment, he deals with it by hitting out and kicking other people. So to get him to gain enough control to stamp his feet like a dinosaur instead of hitting other people is a step in the right direction. And it helps him to be a lot more socially accepted by the other children in that environment as well. And then we'll just continue to scaffold his learning and to teach him, as he learns to control his emotions more, we'll give him more and more strategies to layer and improve what he's doing. So we want to teach children it's okay to be angry and it's okay to feel negative emotions. And the interesting thing is, a lot of adults are fearful of negative emotions, because if my child is expressing he's angry, and if I say that's okay, well, gosh, we might lose control of him, and people might not like him, and he might turn into this, or she might turn into this really angry being, and I'm uncomfortable with that. But it's really important that we are comfortable with the discomfort of people expressing a negative emotion. It's just as important as expressing a positive emotion. It's just that we need to teach our young people to express them in a more socially accepted, positive way, so to speak. So it's okay to cry. It's okay to feel angry. It's okay to stamp our feet. It's okay to shout that I feel sad. That's all good. We want that, because if we can express the emotion, then we're supporting them to become balanced, well-balanced adults, and young children too, and to be able to talk if something's bothering them. It's really important that they can talk about it with people they trust. And of course, there's the tantrum, the extreme emotion, and we can talk about that in a moment. In the meantime, does anybody have any questions or comments? I bet everybody's seen these behaviours I'm talking about on a regular basis if you're working with preschoolers or you have preschool children of your own. If there's no questions, I'll just carry on. So there's 5 steps to teaching about emotions. So be aware of the child's emotional response. So it's being in tune with the emotion yourself, because if you can understand where they're at, then you can help to guide them out of that emotional state. Recognize emotional times as opportunities for intimacy and teaching, to really get close to your child, to really get to understand them a lot better and what makes them tick and what really, does quite the opposite. And we talked about before, listen empathetically and validate the child's feelings. That's really, really important. And help the child to verbally name the emotions, which soothes the nervous system. And like I said before about Daniel Siegel's quote, name them to tame them. And I love that because it's such a great way to remember, name the emotion to tame the emotion. And again, this comes up every time, set consistent limits and boundaries and help the child to problem solve. And if we do that, sometimes this takes a lot longer than maybe saying, stop that. Or if you do this, I will reward you. Or if you don't do this, I will punish you. Rewards and punishment have immediate results, but taking the time to teach and go through these 5 steps can actually feel like it takes quite a bit of time, but it saves so much time in the long run. So because you're empowering the child to make positive choices for themselves. So it means you haven't got to constantly be there policing everything they do, because they will learn following these 5 steps in every situation. They will learn to make the right decision because it's the right decision to make. Sorry, all this talking is making me cough. And think, just to check yourself as well, think when you're thinking about how you're talking to children, think, would I speak to an adult in this way? And then if your answer to yourself is no, I wouldn't, then just rethink what you're doing. Go back to these 5 steps. So what can look like defiance can be normal childhood behavior. So there's a few little things to remember that for children, it takes them a lot longer, 3 to 7 seconds longer after asking a question for them to be able to process. So if you ask a child a question, don't expect an immediate answer because their processing time is slower. So just pause for 3 to 7 seconds as a rule of thumb. Always use a calm and consistent tone of voice. Try not to get agitated or angry, because if you do that, it transfers to the child and the stress interrupts their thinking process. So remembering what we said before, feelings are magnetic. So sometimes if you're agitated or angry, the child is so panicked trying to work out what's happening and what they've done wrong and focusing on the energy of what you're saying that they actually miss the message. Minimize distractions. I mean, that's an obvious one, because that can make it really difficult for children to process. And also get down to the child's level or ask them to look at you so you know they're hearing you. Because very often we think we're given an instruction and a child's being defiant when actually they weren't tuned into you. They were busy playing, watching TV, daydreaming, whatever it might be. So, really take the time to communicate respectfully and at their level and be realistic in your expectations. And a simple rule of thumb too, if you're given an instruction to given instructions to children, don't give too many instructions at once. So if a child's one instruction. For a 2-year-old, most 2-year-olds can cope with 2 instructions. And for 3-year-olds, 3 instructions, no more. So when I say 1 instruction, so for a 1-year-old, it might say, where's your shoes? Or shoes on, or something like that. Fetch your shoes or something. That's 1 instruction. But for a 2-year-old, you might be able to say, can you get me your shoes and your bag? And they'll remember both instructions and come back with both. And for a 3-year-old, it could be, can you get your shoes, put your shoes on, and then get me your bag, and we're going. And that's fine. They can follow those 3 simple instructions. In fact, our goal, it's good to have a goal of a child being able to follow 3 simple instructions before by the time they're 3 or 4-ish. So any questions? Because we're almost done. I don't think there are any. If there are any, Marcia, that you know of, just speak up.
How do you calm yourself when your child is having a big melt?
Yeah. Let's talk about tantrums for a moment, actually. That's a good point. So if a child loses control, completely loses control and has a tantrum, then you'll know it's a tantrum because, well, I mean, most people know a tantrum when they see one. Some children, though, can, you know, if the boundaries are not clear, and throwing tantrums has normally got their children their own way. Some children can be absolute Oscar-winning superstars and throw a fake tantrum, you know, to throw a tantrum, but really they've not lost control. It's just manipulation. They're trying to get their own way, and throwing a tantrum's worked in the past, so I'm going to do this again now. And you'll know the difference between a full-on tantrum because a full-on tantrum, if the child, you can tell the child's in distress. You can tell they've lost it. Normally they can't hear you at all. Doesn't matter what you say, they're not going to be able to understand you because they can't. They're so in fight or flight, they're not taking any information in because the higher brain cuts off. Remember, we talked about that in the last webinar. When we're in fight or flight, our thinking brain is nowhere to be seen. We're so caught up in the feeling brain. You know, if you said to a child who was having a tantrum, do you want some lollies, they still wouldn't hear you. If you said to a child who was faking a tantrum, do you want some lollies? Or you said, if you gave them what they wanted, the tantrum would stop immediately. So it's not really a loss of control, it's just manipulation. And you'll deal with them very differently. Manipulation, you wouldn't give in to the child. You'd just leave them and let them just carry on. Just watch them and see it as entertainment until they recover. Can be very entertaining until they recover. And it's not cruel because they're playing a game. They've not lost control. If they lose control, it's a different ball game altogether. There's not a lot you can do when they're in the throes of a tantrum to stop it immediately. If there's high trust and your child will let you touch them, then do that. It can soothe and it can calm. If they'll allow you to touch them, then bring them close and give them a hug until they've managed to calm themselves down. For most children in the middle of a tantrum, if you try and touch them, it makes it worse. So the best thing to do is stay nearby so they feel safe and secure. They know you're there. You're not shouting. You're not angry. Remember, you remain completely calm, and you remain calm, Sam, by doing the whole flower thing yourself. So smell the flower and blow out the candle. So do mindfulness breathing, or tell yourself, this is just an opportunity to teach. This is okay. What stresses adults is what we think about, either what we're thinking about the child's behavior or what we're thinking other people will think about the child's behavior. And that's often where our stress comes from. You know, our inability to control the child and all those fears that come up. You know, we all want our children to be loved and accepted by other people. So very often it can bring up a lot of fear in ourselves. And that fear then can come in the form of anxiety and the need to control the situation, when in fact, by the time you got to that point, the best thing you can do is to do mindful breathing, calm yourself down as much as you can. If you can't calm down, get your partner or somebody else, somebody who's going to be more calming with the child, to come and support, and just be present to the child and support them to calm their emotions in any way you can. You can talk to them, you can start singing, you can stroke them, you can just hold the hand, or you can just sit near them, and eventually they'll get to the point where they're no longer kicking and screaming, they're actually now starting to feel that flood of sadness. So they'll very often be tearful by then, you know, and that's the time. By then they're normally ready for a big hug. Just bring them close and calm your breathing and calm theirs, and, you know, smell the flower, blow out the candle, and get them to into a much calmer state. And then after that, after you've given them lots of love and affection and TLC, because they've just had a very, very frightening experience, then you can talk about what happened and how they can support themselves, or how they can ask for help, or how they can tell you what they want in future. But children having tantrums, losing control, is a normal part of early childhood development. It's not naughty behaviour at all. It's very, very frightening for children. So it's really, really important that we show empathy and we demonstrate that we care, at the same time as teaching them. Remember the 5 steps, or you can make it into 3 steps if you include the first 2 steps as one. But, you know, if we go through this 5 steps to teach about emotions, then you'll find that the tantrums will get less and less. So Lorraine says, we have a wee man who is continually told he's naughty. For him to be told no, he has for him to be told no, he isn't, has had a big impact on his behavior. Yeah, that's really good, Lorraine. It's so sad. It's so sad when children are labeled. It really is. You know, behavior is communication. Bad behavior or challenging behavior doesn't make them a bad person. It just means they're struggling to communicate, or they're struggling to learn. So to label children and label them as naughty is, I mean, even when I was a child, that was recognized as being wrong. So, you know, it's really not a good thing to do, because labels stick. How many of you know people whose parents will proudly say, oh, he was the naughty one in our family? You know, labels can stick for a lifetime. And, you know, what you say to children can become their beliefs about themselves. Because if the people they love and care about most in the world, their protective guardian, is telling them that they're naughty, or they're stupid, or that whatever words we might use around children, then know that that can become their inner voice. They can carry that with them for the rest of their lives. And it's very, very damaging. It's so damaging to their identity. It's damaging to their self-confidence, to their self-esteem, their beliefs in themselves, and their ability to do things in the future. And, you know, the scary thing is that children will often live up to those expectations. So if you want to dull a child's ability to learn, call them stupid, it will work. It will dull their ability to work, because it will become their inner voice. So this is exactly why we shouldn't do it. Does that answer your question, Lorraine? And I think, you know, share this webinar. And I think as well, labeling children, we will do a future webinar on how to grow your child's self-esteem, and that we can go into a lot more detail about things like that. But, you know, suffice to say, it's very, very damaging to the child. Michelle says, we always struggle with meal times and night routine with my 3-year-old boy. I find myself having to consistently nag to sit down, focus on eating, stop playing, eat your dinner. Does this sound like anybody else's house? And we often have to bribe him to the shower and brush his teeth. Like if you don't brush your teeth, you can't have story time. Right, Michelle, I can see why you do that, but how about, there's a few things here. Make it a routine. So there's no question, like with us as adults, we'll get up and, you know, whatever order you do this in, but you'll get up and you'll brush your teeth, you'll have a shower, you'll have breakfast, you'll go for a run, whatever your morning routine is. And we do that without thinking about it. And this is where having rhythms and rituals for children really, really supports them. Because if you have a good rhythm and ritual to your day, then children don't question it. So you don't get this resistance, because it's just how we do things. So meal times, it's always, children will often, right, there's a whole theory. This is a subject in itself as well, but they have proven that if you leave a child to graze, to feed themselves all day, they will eat a balanced diet. If you provide it, they will eat a balanced diet, and they will eat enough to satisfy their physical needs. So they also say that one of the worst things you can do is fight about food, because if you fight about food, then you're making meal times into a battleground. Because if you're trying to control how much your child eats, and I don't know the situation, I'm not saying you are, Michelle, but for example, if you're trying to control how much your child eats, then your child is going to resist you controlling him. So he'll make it into a fight. He'll keep getting up and he'll not want to eat his food. So I would suggest that you have it as a ritual, a family thing, that all meals are had at the dinner table. And once he leaves the dinner table, then his plate goes away and he's finished his meal. So you're not threatening him. You're saying, we eat our dinner at the dinner table. And if he tries to get down, you say, okay, Joseph, have you finished your meal? And if he says no, then you say, okay, well, you need to sit down, because if you leave the table, that's telling me that you've finished your meal. And chances are he'll come and sit down. And if he doesn't, or he might once until he's had a few more mouthfuls, then follow through on what you've said. It's really important you follow through, because otherwise it's just a threat. So once you've followed through once or twice, he'll soon learn, actually, this is okay. I can eat my meal. Once I've had enough, I can leave the table. And when I leave the table, I know that's dinner over. And you can see that it takes the battle out of it, because you're giving him the opportunity to make a choice. So you're not making it into a fight. So bribing him to have a shower, well, he's well outsmarted you there. Because why would he have a shower himself when you're bribing him to do it? If he's defiant and you're going to bribe him, then he wins both ways, doesn't he? So it's better if you don't use bribery, because you're teaching him to only do it if you're going to give him something he wants after it. So that, again, the best thing to do is to have a rhythm and a ritual where after dinner you go and have a shower, and that's the way you do things. And maybe you have a shower with him, or however it works as a family. Some cultures don't do that, but this is how we do things, and he sees you doing things this way. Children want to be like their parents. If he sees you doing things this way, he'll soon learn that this is actually how we do it, and I'm going to just do this. But it might take a little bit of teaching, because he's actually already learned that you'll bribe him with something he wants to do instead. Yeah. Okay. All right, Michelle. Cool. Great. All right. Well, I would like to just recommend a couple of books that I think are a great read. It's Daniel Siegel again, Dr. Daniel Siegel, and the book is called The Whole Brain Child. And there's a complementary book to that called, excuse me, called No Drama Discipline. And No Drama Discipline basically is all of this that we're talking about. And it teaches you, No Drama Discipline is like the workbook for the book of the whole brain child. So if you can only get one of them, I would get No Drama Discipline. It's really, really good and great for strategies. So enjoy. I look forward to seeing